The Senate chamber in Washington, D.C. was buzzing with anticipation. The room was filled with dignitaries, senators, and members of the press, each eager to witness the high-stakes debate of the day. The issue at hand was a highly controversial piece of legislation, introduced by one of the most vocal liberal senators, Michael Hughes. The bill aimed to overhaul major policies on health care, immigration, and social welfare, issues that had sharply divided the nation. It was a day of reckoning, and at the heart of it all stood Donald Trump, former president and a constant subject of political fire. Hughes had made it his life's work to criticize Trump, to question his every decision, his policies, and his very character. He believed that Trump had been a danger to the country, that his presidency had weakened America's standing on the world stage and divided the people. As the session began, Hughes wasted no time. He immediately launched into a barrage of accusations, his voice unwavering as he painted Trump as the very embodiment of everything wrong with America. "Mr. Trump," Hughes said, his eyes fixed on the former president, "your time is over. You may have convinced a portion of the population that your chaos is leadership, but the truth is, you are a symbol of division and greed. You have done more to tear apart the fabric of this nation than anyone before you." The room was quiet, but the air was thick with tension. Senators on both sides of the aisle leaned in, eager to hear Trump's response. The cameras were trained on him, ready to capture every word, every movement. Trump stood, his posture confident as he made his way to the podium. He was dressed in a sharp navy blue suit, his signature red tie completing the look. The moment he spoke, the audience felt the weight of his words. "Senator Hughes," Trump began, his voice calm but strong, "you can stand here all day and spew your rhetoric, but I will tell you this. America is not broken. It's been held back by people like you, politicians who talk a big game but never deliver. You sit here in your ivory tower, criticizing me for putting the American people first." Hughes scoffed. "You talk about the people, Mr. Trump, but your policies were divisive. You set this nation back decades with your rhetoric. You isolated us from our allies. You divided our communities, and you created chaos." Trump didn't flinch. "And what's your solution, Senator? More of the same? You and your colleagues have had decades to fix these problems. And what have you done? Nothing. I came in, I shook things up, and I put America first. I didn't waste time with political games." There was a murmur from the audience. Trump's words were sharp, piercing through the room like a knife. Hughes was visibly rattled. He had prepared for this moment, expecting a defensive response, perhaps a moment of weakness from Trump. But what he got instead was a calm, calculated response that had turned his accusations back on him. Hughes quickly tried to regain control. "You speak of America first, but what about the people who were left behind in your pursuit of wealth and power? What about the vulnerable, the minorities, the working-class families who suffered under your policies?" Trump leaned forward, his eyes locking with Hughes. "I didn't leave anyone behind. I gave the American people the chance to thrive. My policies created jobs, lowered taxes, and put us back on the map. But you and your party, you'd rather spend your time trying to rewrite history than actually solve the problems facing this country." The tension in the room escalated as Trump and Hughes continued to trade barbs, each trying to outdo the other with sharp words and bold accusations. But it was clear that Trump was in control. He had turned the tables on Hughes, taking his criticisms and throwing them right back in his face. As the debate raged on, the media's attention remained fixed on the two men. News outlets across the country were already broadcasting the confrontation live, knowing that this was a defining moment in the battle for America's future. But for all the noise, the room itself was silent. The eyes of the nation were focused on Trump, waiting for him to finish what he had started. Hughes attempted one final push, trying to appeal to the chamber's more liberal members. "You may have your followers, Mr. Trump, but that doesn't make you right. You have divided this country, and you've endangered our future. You've put your interests above the country's, and now it's time for you to step aside." Trump paused, letting the words hang in the air for a moment. Then he stepped forward. "Step aside? Senator, I don't step aside. I stand with the American people, and I always will. The room was frozen. The entire chamber, the reporters, and the viewers at home were on the edge of their seats, waiting for what would come next. Trump had made his statement, and in that moment, it was clear that he was far from done. The atmosphere in the chamber was electric. The air was thick with tension, and the eyes of every senator, reporter, and viewer were fixed on Donald Trump. His last words had sent ripples of uncertainty through the room. He wasn't just responding to Hughes. He was sending a clear message to everyone watching. He wasn't going anywhere. His presence in the Senate was more than symbolic. It was a statement, a declaration that he still held power and influence, despite being out of office. Senator Hughes stood frozen, momentarily speechless. He had expected a defensive response from Trump, a stammered retreat into his usual rhetoric. But what he received was a masterclass in political combat. Trump had not only defended himself, but had reframed the debate. Hughes had swung hard, but Trump had hit back with even more force. The room was silent, all eyes on Hughes, who was now visibly struggling to formulate a response. The liberal senators, who had once been so confident, were now caught in a precarious position. They had watched Trump dismantle Hughes's arguments, turning the tables in ways they hadn't anticipated. But Hughes wasn't about to back down. His political career depended on making a stand. He had to recover. Mr. Trump, Hughes finally spoke, his voice tight. You may think you've won this round, but the truth is, your time has passed. The American people have seen through your false promises. The chaos you created, the lies you spread. It's all catching up to you. Trump, who had been standing at the podium, took a slow step forward. The chaos you talk about, Senator, wasn't created by me. It was created by people like you. You sit in your ivory tower, acting as though you know what the average American is going through. You don't. And that's the problem. You've spent your entire career pretending to care, but when the rubber met the road, you failed them. The liberal senators shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Hughes was clearly losing his grip on the debate. His face reddened with frustration, but he pressed on, trying to regain control of the narrative. You talk about the American people, but your actions have hurt them. You've endangered their health, their security, their very way of life. Your reckless decisions, your refusal to acknowledge the consequences of your leadership, are the reason we're here today. Trump's response was swift and unwavering. I did what was necessary to protect the American people. I didn't waste time on political correctness or globalist agendas. I put America first, and that's something you'll never understand. Hughes was growing desperate now. The attacks weren't landing the way he had hoped, and his rhetoric was beginning to falter. He resorted to one final, desperate attempt to make Trump look like the villain. Your administration was a disaster, Mr. Trump. You've hurt women, minorities, veterans, and the very fabric of this nation. Your policies were built on division, on hate. Trump's eyes flashed with determination. If speaking the truth is division, then call it what you want. But the truth is what America needs, Senator. For too long, politicians like you have pandered to special interests, ignored the concerns of the people, and failed to deliver results. My policies gave people jobs, brought our troops home, and protected our borders. I didn't do it for power. I did it for the American people. The camera flashes from the press corps seemed to intensify as the tension grew. Hughes, who had once seemed so confident in his moral superiority, now appeared unhinged. The more Trump spoke, the more Hughes's arguments seemed to crumble. The room was divided. Some senators whispered to each other, while others sat motionless, processing the magnitude of the moment. Trump's ability to speak directly to the heart of the American people, to connect with their frustrations and hopes, was evident. He had always understood the pulse of the nation better than his critics, and now, in this room, he was proving it once again. Hughes, unwilling to admit defeat, took a deep breath and tried to steer the conversation back to a more personal angle. You speak of patriotism, Mr. Trump, but I ask you this. What about the millions of people who felt alienated by your words, by your policies? What about the people you left behind? Trump didn't flinch. The people who felt alienated by me are the ones who have been forgotten by you and your kind. The working-class Americans, the small business owners, the families who were left to fend for themselves while you and your friends played politics. I didn't leave them behind. I gave them a voice, and I'll continue to fight for them, whether you like it or not. It was clear that Hughes had lost the room. The liberal senators who had once cheered for him now sat in stunned silence, watching as Trump dismantled every accusation and returned it with conviction. Hughes had failed to land a single blow. His words, once so forceful, now felt hollow and empty in comparison to Trump's unapologetic defense of his presidency. As the debate wore on, Hughes's frustration grew. He could see the momentum slipping away. He had tried every angle, attacks on Trump's character, his policies, his leadership, but nothing seemed to stick. Trump had not only deflected his accusations, he had turned them into his greatest strengths. The media coverage began to shift. What had started as a seemingly predictable political confrontation had now become a clear victory for Trump. The pundits on TV, who had once predicted Hughes would easily win the argument, were now forced to reconsider their positions. Trump had silenced his critics with a series of calm, powerful responses that showed his unwavering commitment to the people he had served. It was clear now that Hughes's career was in jeopardy. The senators' desperate attempts to salvage the debate were falling flat, and the world was watching as Trump proved once again why he was a force to be reckoned with in American politics. As the session drew to a close, Hughes, defeated and exhausted, walked away from the podium. Trump, ever the showman, stood tall, his gaze unwavering as he addressed the room one last time. The American people know the truth, and no matter how hard you try to spin it, that truth will always prevail. The cameras captured the final moments of the debate, and it was clear Trump had won. The room was silent as Hughes exited, and Trump remained, his presence commanding and unyielding. The battle had been fought, and he had come out victorious. The aftermath of the debate rippled through Washington, D.C., and across the nation. News outlets were quick to report the dramatic showdown between Donald Trump and Senator Michael Hughes. What had started as a heated debate over policy quickly transformed into a defining moment of political theater, one that would shape the future of both men's careers. Trump's victory in the Senate chamber was more than just a win in an argument. It was a testament to his enduring influence and his ability to resonate with the American people. The media that had once dismissed him, ridiculed him, and questioned his political relevance were now forced to reckon with the fact that he still commanded the national stage. Trump had not only defended his past actions, but had framed them as a bold and necessary stand for the people who felt neglected by Washington. His words had struck a chord with millions of Americans who had long felt that their concerns were being ignored by the establishment. As the news coverage continued, commentators from across the political spectrum weighed in. Some grudgingly admitted that Trump had won the debate, while others tried to spin his victory as a mere fluke. But regardless of the spin, one thing was clear. Trump's message had gotten through. The American people were watching, and they had seen a man who was unafraid to stand up for what he believed in. In the days following the debate, the story took on a life of its own. Hughes, once a rising star within his party, found himself facing a barrage of criticism from his own supporters. Many questioned his ability to lead after he had been so thoroughly outmaneuvered by Trump. His credibility had been shattered, and whispers of a potential loss in his upcoming re-election campaign began to circulate. He had been publicly humiliated, and there was no easy way to recover from such a defeat. Trump, on the other hand, was buoyed by the outcome. His supporters rallied behind him, hailing him as a hero who had successfully stood up to the political elite. His approval ratings surged in the wake of the debate, and his ability to connect with ordinary Americans, those who felt forgotten by the political class, was more evident than ever. His dominance in the political arena was undeniable, and it seemed as though nothing could stop him from continuing to shape the narrative in his favor. The media, while still critical of Trump, began to acknowledge his unyielding influence. News outlets that had once ridiculed his every move now found themselves in the uncomfortable position of having to report on his successes. Even those who had hoped for his political demise were forced to concede that Trump was still a force to be reckoned with. For Trump, the debate had been a chance to reclaim the narrative, to prove to the world that he was not just a former president living in the past, but a man who still had the power to shape the future. He had turned the tables on Hughes, using his words to expose the senator's weaknesses and make his own case for why his leadership had been necessary. In the end, it wasn't just about the policies he had enacted. It was about the people he had fought for and the message he had delivered that resonated with millions of Americans. The moral of the story was clear. In the face of relentless criticism and political attacks, true leaders don't back down. They stand firm in their beliefs, speak the truth, and refuse to be silenced by the forces that seek to undermine them. Trump's victory in the Senate chamber wasn't just a political win. It was a victory for every American who felt they had been overlooked, ignored, or dismissed by the establishment. It was a reminder that leadership isn't about playing by the rules. It's about having the courage to challenge the status quo and fight for what you believe is right. In the end, the debate had not only defined the future of Senator Hughes' career, but it also solidified Trump's place in the political landscape. His ability to speak directly to the concerns of the American people, to confront his critics head-on, and to stand his ground in the face of intense opposition had left a lasting impact on the nation. Whether you loved him or hated him, one thing was certain. Donald Trump was a force to be reckoned with, and he would continue to shape the political conversation for years to come. As for Hughes, the damage had been done. His political future was uncertain, and the humiliating defeat would haunt him for the rest of his career. But for Trump, the victory was more than just a win in a single debate. It was a statement of strength, resolve, and an unwavering commitment to the people he had always fought for. The Senate chamber, once a place of intense political division, had been the setting for a battle that would be remembered for years to come. And in the end, it was clear that Trump had not only survived the fight, he had triumphed.